Shadows in the gallery. Nora Winters adjusted the silk scarf around her neck, wincing as her fingers brushed against the tender skin beneath. The gallery's harsh lighting was both blessing and curse, perfect for illuminating the artwork, merciless in revealing what she tried to hide. 3 years at Luminous Gallery had taught her every trick for concealing the evidence of her life outside these walls. "The Blackwood pieces need to be centered precisely," called Dominic, the gallery owner. "He's flying in this afternoon, and you know his reputation for perfection." Nora nodded, focusing on the large format photographs being carefully unpacked. Vincent Blackwood's work was breathtaking, stark landscapes juxtaposed with intimate portraits, all capturing light in ways that seemed impossible. His exhibition, Invisible Boundaries, was the most anticipated event of the season. "I've arranged everything according to his specifications," she replied, checking her tablet. What she didn't mention was how she'd stayed until midnight, reconfiguring the layout after Thomas had finally passed out at their apartment. The memory of his rage when she mentioned the late work night made her shoulder throb beneath her cardigan. The gallery door chimed, and Nora froze as Thomas walked in, his handsome face arranged in the charming smile that had once made her heart race. Now it only made her stomach knot. "Surprise, darling," he said, kissing her cheek possessively. "Thought I'd bring you lunch since you were too rushed to eat breakfast." His fingers dug into her waist, a reminder only she could feel. "Thomas, I'm quite busy with the installation," she stammered. "Nonsense," he insisted, his voice carrying that edge she recognized as danger. "Surely Dominic can spare you for 20 minutes. Right, Dom?" Dominic, oblivious to the undercurrents, waved them off. "Take 30, Nora." Blackwood's flight was delayed anyway. At a nearby cafe, Thomas's facade crumbled the moment they sat down. "Who were you texting last night?" he demanded, scrolling through her phone. "And this exhibition? You didn't tell me how prestigious it was. Will you be attending the opening alone?" "It's work, Thomas," she whispered, eyes down. "Just work. Nothing is just anything with you," he snapped. "I've seen how men look at you, how you encourage it." A shadow fell across their table. "Excuse me," came a deep voice with a slight Italian accent. "You're Nora Winters from Luminous?" Nora looked up into the most perceptive eyes she'd ever encountered. The man was tall, dressed in simple black, with silver-streaked dark hair and a camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Yes," she managed. "Vincent Blackwood," he said, extending his hand. "Your arrangement of my Venetian series is inspired. I came early to see the space and found myself captivated by your vision." Thomas's face hardened. She was just having lunch with her fiancé. Vincent's gaze flicked between them, lingering momentarily on Nora's scarf, her downcast eyes. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. "A pleasure," he said to Thomas, then turned back to Nora. "I hope you'll walk me through your curatorial choices when you return. Your perspective adds dimensions even I hadn't considered." After Vincent left, Thomas's jealousy erupted in harsh whispers and threats, but Nora barely heard him. For the first time in years, something had broken through her carefully constructed walls, the way Vincent Blackwood had looked at her. Not with pity or lust, but with recognition, as if he saw her completely, shadows and all. Through the lens Vincent, Blackwood moved through the crowded gallery with practiced ease, accepting compliments with gracious nods, while his attention remained fixed elsewhere. The exhibition opening had drawn Manhattan's elite, critics, collectors, and socialites mingling beneath the glow of his photographs. But it was Nora who captivated him. The way she navigated the space with quiet efficiency, a shadow bringing light to others. "Your work transcends conventional photography," gushed a critic, champagne flute waving dangerously close to a frame. The interplay between vulnerability and strength, simply masterful. Vincent thanked her politely before excusing himself. He'd spent 30 years capturing human stories through his lens, recognizing pain disguised as composure. The gallery assistant with the silk scarves and long sleeves carried herself with the same careful movements he'd documented in war zones and disaster. Areas of Survivor's Gate, the placement of Venetian reflections beside Arctic. Solitude was inspired, he said, approaching Nora as she arranged canapes. Your curation tells a story between my images that I hadn't fully articulated myself. Nora flushed. The contrasting environments share an unexpected intimacy. Both places where people can simultaneously exist in crowds yet remain utterly alone. Vincent studied her. You have an artist's eye. No, she began, then stopped as the gallery doors swung open forcefully. Thomas entered, clearly intoxicated, his expensive suit rumpled. The gallery's ambient noise dimmed as heads turned toward the disruption. There she is, he announced too loudly. The woman behind the man behind the camera. He swayed toward Nora, whose face had drained of color. Always supporting others' visions while ignoring her obligations at home. Vincent watched her transform, spine stiffening, eyes lowering, body preparing for impact. He'd seen this metamorphosis before, had photographed women in shelters with this same protective posture. Sir? Dominic intervened smoothly. Perhaps you'd like some water before... Perhaps you'd like to stop monopolizing my fiancé's time, Thomas snarled, grabbing Nora's wrist. The silk scarf slipped, revealing a necklace of purple bruises. Several guests gasped, then awkwardly averted their eyes. The collective decision to not witness becoming its own form of violence. Vincent set down his glass. Remove your hand, he said, voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Thomas sneered. Mind your own business, photographer. She's mine. That, Vincent replied, stepping closer, is precisely where you're mistaken. His accent thickened with controlled anger. No person belongs to another. And that hand? He nodded toward Thomas's grip on Nora's wrist. Is leaving marks on the woman who brought my exhibition to life. So I am making it my business. The gallery fell silent. Security guards moved closer, but Vincent held up a hand to stay them, his eyes never leaving Thomas. You know nothing about us, Thomas hissed. I know enough, Vincent replied. I've documented human dignity and its violation across 6 continents. I recognize control disguised as protection. He turned to Nora. And I see courage when it stands before me, even if it doesn't yet recognize itself. Something shifted in Nora's expression, a flicker of possibility. She gently extracted her wrist from Thomas's grip. I'm working, Thomas, she said, her voice barely audible. Please go home. You're embarrassing yourself, Thomas warned, leaning closer. You're nothing without me. Vincent didn't move, but his presence seemed to expand. That's enough, he said, the words like stone dropping into still water. Ms. Winters is a professional being harassed at her workplace. Security will escort you out or the police will. Your choice. As Thomas was led away, hurling threats and promises of retribution, Dominic rushed to contain the scandal. Guests resumed their conversations with renewed enthusiasm, the drama adding spice to their evening. Vincent turned to find Nora had vanished. He found her in the gallery's back office, hands shaking as she attempted to fix her scarf. I've ruined your opening, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Vincent shook his head. You've ruined nothing. He kept a respectful distance. I leave tomorrow for an international project, documenting women rebuilding after domestic violence across different cultures. He placed a business card on the desk. I need an assistant with your eye for composition and narrative. The position begins next week. He turned to leave, then paused. You don't have to go home tonight, Nora. There are places, people who can help. I can make calls. For the first time since he'd met her, Nora looked directly into his eyes. Why would you help me? Because 20 years ago I photographed my sister wearing scarves like yours, he said simply. And I did nothing until it was too late. Developing courage. The Manila heat pressed against Nora's skin as she adjusted her camera settings. 3 months into Vincent's international project, scarves had given way to light cotton tops, and makeup no longer served as camouflage. Standing on a rooftop in the Philippines, photographing women creating a community garden amidst urban poverty, she barely resembled the gallery assistant who'd fled New York with nothing but a hastily packed suitcase. Composition is balanced, but move slightly left, Vincent advised, his own camera clicking rhythmically. Let the light catch her hands as she works the soil. Nora adjusted, finding the angle that transformed an ordinary moment into visual poetry. Working alongside Vincent had changed everything. How she saw the world, how she valued her perspective, how she recognized strength in others and gradually, in herself. The night after the gallery incident had been a blur. A shelter counselor named Petra, paperwork, police, protective orders. Dominic's unexpected support when she resigned. Then somehow a passport and visa expedited through Vincent's connections, and a flight to Tokyo, the first stop on the project. These women were trafficked as teenagers, Vincent explained as they packed up their equipment. Now they run this cooperative, teaching sustainable agriculture to girls at risk. Nora nodded, watching the women laugh together as they harvested vegetables. Their resilience is remarkable, as is yours, Vincent said quietly. The compliment still made her uncomfortable. I just took your offer of employment. After surviving years of isolation and control, Vincent countered. Do not diminish that achievement, Nora. I've watched you transform from assistant to artist these past months. Later that evening, in the small apartment they'd rented as a workspace, Nora downloaded the day's images. Vincent had insisted she maintain her own portfolio throughout their travels. At first, she'd photographed tentatively, safe landscapes, architectural details, but gradually she'd found herself drawn to the women they interviewed, capturing moments Vincent missed. Her phone buzzed, a message from Petra with updates about Thomas. He'd violated the restraining order twice, was facing charges, had been fired from his firm. Once such news would have paralyzed her with fear. Tonight it felt distant, like reading about a stranger. Good news? Vincent asked, entering with coffee. News from another life, she replied, setting the phone down. The legal process continues. Vincent nodded, not pushing for details, a courtesy she'd come to cherish. Their professional relationship maintained clear boundaries, despite the intimacy that naturally developed between travelers. He was mentor, colleague, and increasingly friend, but nothing more. The thought occasionally disappointed her, though she wasn't ready to examine why. I'd like your opinion, she said, pulling up a photograph she'd taken that morning, a close-up of weathered hands creating intricate seed patterns. Vincent studied it, his expression shifting from professional assessment to genuine admiration. This is exceptional work, Nora. The composition, yes, but more importantly, the story it tells. I've been thinking, she said hesitantly. The gallery in Singapore next month, perhaps I could submit a few pieces alongside yours? The words surprised her even as she spoke them. 6 months ago, such ambition would have been unthinkable. Thomas had methodically dismantled her confidence, convinced her that her artistic aspirations were childish fantasies. Vincent's face brightened. I was hoping you would suggest it. Your perspective on this project is unique. You connect with these women differently than I can. That night, unable to sleep in the humid darkness, Nora reviewed her growing collection. Images from Tokyo, Bangkok, Kolkata, and now Manila, women rebuilding lives shattered by violence. In each face, she recognized fragments of herself. The healing wasn't linear. Some days still brought panic attacks and nightmares. But like photography, recovery was about finding light in darkness, capturing moments of strength amid vulnerability. Tomorrow, they would interview the cooperative's founder, a woman who'd transformed her trauma into purpose. Nora set her alarm, then paused, fingertips tracing the fading scar on her collarbone, a souvenir from the night Thomas had thrown her against a bathroom sink. For the first time, she considered it might make a powerful photograph. Focus shift. The Singapore gallery hummed with conversations in multiple languages as visitors moved between photographs. 6 months into the project, invisible boundaries had evolved into visible strength, a dual exhibition featuring both Vincent's and Nora's work. Her section, smaller but commanding its own significant attention, bore the title Through Her Eyes. Remarkable perspective, commented a British curator, studying Nora's photograph of a Nepalese woman standing in the doorway of her new business. The composition creates such tension between past and future. Nora thanked her, still adjusting to receiving recognition. The exhibition had traveled from Asia to Europe, gathering momentum and critical acclaim. Tonight marked its return to Southeast Asia before the final showing in New York. "Your series is overshadowing mine," Vincent said, appearing beside her with a proud smile. As it should. Their working relationship had evolved over months of shared hotel lobbies, long flights, and midnight editing sessions. The careful distance Vincent had initially maintained had gradually transformed into something more complex, a connection neither of them had anticipated or acknowledged. "Hardly overshadowing," Nora countered. "Your work gave this project its foundation, while yours gave it its heart," he replied. "You've captured something I couldn't. The intimate perspective of someone who understands transformation from the inside." His phone rang before she could respond. Vincent excused himself to take the call, leaving Nora to continue greeting visitors. Across the gallery, she caught sight of her most controversial piece, a black-and-white self-portrait showing the scars on her neck and shoulder, her face reflected fractured in a broken mirror. Beside it hung photographs she'd taken of women in similar moments of vulnerable revelation, their bodies telling stories of survival. Ms. Winters, a Singaporean journalist, approached. "I'm Jia Lin from Art Asia. Would you share how your perspective as a survivor influenced your artistic approach?" The question no longer startled Nora. Early in the tour, she'd made the decision to speak openly about her experience, recognizing that authenticity amplified the project's impact. Each time she shared her story, its power over her diminished. After finishing the interview, Nora found Vincent on the gallery's rooftop terrace, gazing at the illuminated skyline. "The collector from Hong Kong purchased your entire Mumbai series," she informed him, joining him at the railing. Vincent nodded, unusually pensive. "Nora, we need to discuss New York." Her stomach tightened. The final exhibition would bring her full circle, back to where her journey began. Back to a city where Thomas, despite legal consequences, still lived. "I've been offered a position with the International Women's Foundation," Vincent continued, leading their visual documentation initiative. "It would mean relocating to Geneva." "That's wonderful," Nora said, ignoring the unexpected hollow feeling in her chest. "You've earned such recognition." "I recommended you to replace me for the Southeast Asia region," he added. "If you're interested." "Your work has resonated deeply here." Nora stared at the city lights, processing his words. The opportunity was extraordinary. Professional validation beyond anything she'd imagined when fleeing New York. "Why?" she asked finally. "Because you're exceptional," Vincent replied simply. "Because these women trust you with their stories in ways they never trusted me." "That's not what I'm asking." Nora turned to face him directly. "Why maintain this careful distance between us, only to push me further away with separate continents?" The question hung between them, disrupting months of unspoken understanding. Vincent's expression softened. "Because I vowed never to be another man who shapes your choices, Nora. Your recovery, your career, they needed to develop independently of any feelings I might have. My recovery is not complete. But it is mine," she said, the confidence in her voice still new but increasingly natural. "And my choices are mine as well. You've never tried to control either." "The power imbalance has shifted," she interrupted. "I'm not your assistant anymore, Vincent. I'm a colleague whose work stands on its own merit." She stepped closer. "And I deserve the dignity of making informed choices, including about us." Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The gesture held a tenderness they'd both been carefully avoiding. "I've respected your boundaries for months," he said quietly. "I needed to be certain you were healing for yourself, not for me. And now I find myself in Singapore, offering you a career opportunity that would separate us, because I'm still trying to do the right thing." His laugh was soft, self-deprecating, while selfishly hoping you might refuse it. Later that night, reviewing exhibition photographs in Vincent's hotel suite, professional conversation gradually gave way to personal truths. Nora spoke of her lingering fears about returning to New York, Vincent revealed how his sister's death had shaped his career documenting resilience. When his hand finally entwined with hers, the contact felt both revolutionary and inevitable, like completing a composition that had been forming all along. Capturing light. The luminous gallery buzzed with anticipation. 1 year after her hasty departure, Nora Winters had returned to New York, not as an assistant, but as the featured artist of the season's most discussed exhibition, Reclaimed: Portraits of Survival and Renaissance. "The symmetry is rather perfect," Dominic said, surveying the transformed space. "You left from this gallery in crisis and return in triumph." Nora adjusted the lighting on her centerpiece, a triptych featuring women from 3 continents, each photographed in moments of personal transformation. "It feels like returning to a familiar room that's been completely redesigned," she admitted. The exhibition represented the culmination of 18 months documenting women rebuilding after violence, work that had carried her through 14 countries and her own parallel journey of recovery. What had begun as Vincent's project had evolved into a powerful collaboration, then finally into Nora's independent vision. "Has he arrived yet?" Dominic asked, glancing toward the door. "His flight lands at 6, Nora replied, checking her watch. Vincent had remained in Geneva, establishing the Foundation's new visual documentation program, while she completed her final pieces in a Brooklyn studio. The separation had been difficult but purposeful, space for her to create without influence, to stand firmly in her own artistic perspective. The restraining order against Thomas had become permanent after multiple violations. He'd eventually relocated to Chicago, a fact that had allowed Nora to reclaim New York without constant vigilance. The fear hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something manageable, a shadow rather than a cage. "Ms. Winters?" A gallery assistant approached. "The Times critic has arrived for her private viewing." As Nora guided the influential critic through the exhibition, explaining her compositional choices and the stories behind each portrait, she felt a surreal sense of completion. The women in her photographs, from Tokyo to Rio de Janeiro, had trusted her with their vulnerability precisely because she offered her own in return. "This piece is particularly striking," the critic said, pausing before a photograph Nora had titled Threshold. It showed a door half open, with light streaming through the crack, illuminating a woman's partial silhouette. "It represents the moment of decision," Nora explained. "When staying becomes more frightening than leaving." The critic nodded thoughtfully. "Your work has a unique perspective, both witness and participant. It's extraordinarily powerful." She gestured toward a small black case mounted on the wall. "And this element?" Nora pressed a small button, revealing a viewfinder. "Each installation includes an interactive component, an invitation to look through the lens of these women's experiences." After completing the interview, Nora retreated to the gallery office, the same room where Vincent had offered her escape a year earlier. She opened her laptop to review her presentation for the evening's formal opening, when she would publicly share her story alongside her art. A knock interrupted her concentration. She looked up to find Vincent in the doorway, his familiar presence sending warmth through her chest. "You're early," she said, rising to meet him. "I switched flights," he explained, entering the office. "I wanted to see the exhibition before the crowds." They embraced, the months of separation dissolving. Vincent held her at arm's length, studying her face. "You look different," he observed. "I am different," she confirmed. She led him through the gallery, watching his reactions to her completed vision. His silence spoke volumes, professional respect rather than mere personal pride. "It's magnificent, Nora," he said finally, standing before her self-portrait. The photograph showed Nora looking directly into the camera, scars visible but no longer the focus, her expression revealing neither victim nor survivor, but simply human complexity. "I've been offered a book deal," she told him, pairing images with first-person narratives from the women, "and a visiting professor position at Parsons next semester." Vincent smiled. "I'm not surprised. Will you accept?" "Yes to both," she said, "while maintaining my role with the Foundation." "And you? Will you extend your contract in Geneva? The question contained another unspoken one. Their relationship, nurtured across continents through video calls and occasional reunions, had reached its own threshold. Actually, Vincent said, the New York office needs a director. I've recommended myself for the position. Outside, guests had begun to arrive. Soon, Nora would stand before colleagues, critics, and collectors to present work born from her darkest moments. Vincent would be there, not as rescuer or even mentor, but as equal and partner. Ready? He asked, offering his hand. Nora interlaced her fingers with his, feeling the strength that came not from him, but through their connection. The same strength she'd captured in hundreds of photographs of women around the world. She thought of the gallery assistant she'd been, hiding bruises beneath scarves, and marveled at how completely that woman had transformed while somehow remaining herself. Ready, she confirmed, stepping forward into light of her own making.